It is truly an honor and a pleasure to be with all of you this morning. It is my first visit to your country of Singapore in about 25 years. Having this great fortune to be in this beautiful place with each of you is a great thrill for my heart. I was asked to speak on this subject of earning with integrity and spending with compassion. There's a proverb that you can tell how rich you are by counting how many things you have that money cannot buy. Not long ago, I met the CEO of an international corporation. He was a billionaire. He came to the meeting by flying in his private jet. And myself, I hitchhiked to get there. When he heard this, he became so enthusiastic. He said, "Everything about what you say is so correct. The best things in life, the most important things in life that bring meaning and happiness cannot be bought with money." He said, "Money cannot buy peace, cannot buy a united family, cannot buy fulfillment internally, cannot buy love." He went on and on and on. And after his explanation, I asked him a simple question. Then why do you work so hard for money? And he gave a really good answer. It was an honest answer. He said, "Money cannot buy the most important things in life, the really meaningful things. But it's nice to have the things that money can't buy." Things can give some flickering sensation of pleasure to the body and the senses and to the mind, but things can never give fulfillment to the heart. An evolved human society is when people love people and use things to express that love. But unfortunately, caught up in the whirlwind of the environment around us, of society, all too often people love things and they use people to get them and keep them. That is a society where fulfillment, meaning, and proper direction is superficial, artificial, and very, very shallow. Years ago, I met Mother Teresa in Calcutta. We had a long talk, but I remember one thing that she spoke. The biggest problem in human society is hunger. Not hunger of the stomach, hunger of the heart. Hunger of the stomach is not such a problem. You just give some food and it's satisfied. But she said, I traveled the world. New York, Los Angeles, London, Sydney, Mumbai. And I see even the wealthiest, most powerful people, their hearts are starving. They are in total poverty within. Because you see, only love. To love and to be loved can nourish and satisfy the hunger of the heart. Anandamayo Bhyashat, the Brahma Sutra tells, that there's something everyone has in common. Whatever our religion, whatever our nationality, whatever our race, whatever our sex, whatever our species, everyone is looking for pleasure. And everyone wants to avoid what obstructs pleasure, which is called pain. And so many different people are looking for it in so many ways. I was recently in a holy place in India, and I was with someone who was wearing spectacles. And a monkey jumped up to that person and grabbed his spectacles and jumped up and ran up to a tree. He was showing the spectacles. He wanted a banana in exchange. The person said to me, why did that monkey do that to me? I said, the same way, for the same essential reason that everyone does everything practically in this world. He's looking for pleasure. He wants a banana. And because we cut down all the forests with the trees, this is the only way he knows how to get it. The little cockroach. We don't like when they crawl on our kitchen cabinets. But they're looking for pleasure. Everyone is. Why? What is the origin of that universal need wherever there's life? Janmadyasya yataha. The origin of true pleasure is to love and to be loved. As it has been explained by Rajiv in his very beautiful explanation, that's the nature of our true self. The Bhagavad Gita tells, Na jayate mriyate vakadarshet. We are not this body, but the true self is in this body. We are seeing through our eyes and hearing through our ears and tasting through our tongue and thinking through our brains and loving through our hearts. But who am I? This is the basis of knowledge. Unless we understand who I am, we can't really understand who anyone else is or what is our relationship. But unfortunately, even educational systems so often forget to teach people these universal values. The word education comes from educari, which means to bring out what is within. The Bhagavad Gita explains what wisdom is. When I first heard this particular verse, I was thinking, that's it. That is what I'm looking for. We saw in this video, which I had no idea they were going to show that. I left home when I was 19 years old, looking for a meaningful, purposeful life. I was born and raised in the Chicago area of the United States of America. I saw tremendous wealth, very nice highways, nice phones that work, television in every house. But it was the 1960s when I was a teenager. And the young people who were born in an environment where their parents worked so hard with the idea that having wealth, having comforts, having security will make us happy. A large segment of their children rejected all of their ideals, became the counterculture. Why? Because we saw, yes, our parents have so much, and they're giving us so much. But just a few miles away, the African American people are condemned to live and die in the ghettos, and they have no way out. The Constitution says that everyone has equal rights. But socially, unless you have light skin, unless you're from a particular religion, you don't have equal rights. And many of my friends, I saw, they became alcoholics, drug addicts, because they were so beaten down by discrimination, prejudice, and poverty. And there was a war in Vietnam where you were forced to go. It's called the draft. And I had friends who died and came back completely mentally disordered, fighting for something that they didn't believe in, and it came out later, it was a completely useless war. You see, in those days, it wasn't just about what we believe. It's about the reality all around us. I joined the civil rights movement. I marched with the African Americans, and my fellow white people used to throw bottles at me and stones at me. And I kind of felt good about that. I demonstrated against a war that didn't make sense. Peacefully, freedom of speech. And my friends were clubbed and imprisoned, and I was tear gassed by the police who were supposed to be protecting our freedom. Yes, I was troubled. But I heard the words of Mahatma Gandhi. Be the change you want to see in the world. Having money, having comforts, having power, it all seems so hypocritical unless we address these problems. And eventually I believed that interchange was something that was spiritual. So I went to London, and from London with no money I hitchhiked across Europe, Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and came to India. And I lived in the Himalayas. And I remember so many relative realizations I was having. What is really wealth? I was living in a cave in the jungles of the Himalayas. And To me, that cave was so luxurious. What scenery! You wake up in the morning and there's birds chirping everywhere around you, and there's beautiful greenery and mountains and waterfalls, and you can see Mother Ganga from a distance. And the cave was nice. It had good cross ventilation. How beautiful. It was nicer to me than a beautiful penthouse suite in a luxury hotel. So really, what is happiness? It's relative, according to what we value. But I was searching for meaning and purpose. And then I came to this verse. Vidyavanaya sampane brahmani gabihastini sunichaiva swapaki cha pandita samadarsha. What is wisdom? According to Gita, it is defined in this way. When we see every living being with equal vision. When we understand truly who we are, what is our connection with God, our supreme source, then we naturally, not just theoretically, but we understand, we realize, and we appreciate our relationship with every living being. Whether they are priests, whether they're farmers, whether they're heads of state, whether they're homeless people, whether they're black or white or brown or yellow or any other color, whether they're male or female, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Jain, Sikh, Jewish, Buddhist, Parsi, agnostic, atheist. Whether they're humans or elephants or cows or dogs or cats. When we understand the sacredness of our own life, we can appreciate the sacredness of life in everyone, everywhere. And we understand the sacredness of the environment, which is a divine gift that we are all responsible to share with one another. Why is there so much pollution in the way people treat each other? And pollution in the water, in the air, in the earth. Because there's pollution in the human heart. The ecology of the heart. Now, what is that pollution? The Vedas explain there are 6 primary things that cause us to behave in exploitative, fearful ways. Greed, arrogance, selfish lust, anger, envy, and illusion. It's because of those pollutants in our heart that we're polluting others. And spirituality or religion, it is for the purpose of cleaning our hearts. And with a clean heart, we can actually perceive who we really are and what we really want. The soul is eternal. It's beyond birth. It's beyond death. When you love God, you will naturally love your neighbor as yourself. Because you'll see, they are my brothers, they are my sisters. This is what is considered to be knowledge in the Bhagavad Gita. This is what is to be considered knowledge in the Bible and all other great scriptures and all the great true philosophers and holy people that have ever walked the face of this earth. If we want a fulfilling life, if we want to provide an example that will inspire our children and grandchildren for a fulfilling life, it's most important that we appreciate what is fulfillment so we can show the way. Every year, our Bhaktivedanta Hospital has a cataract eye camp in a place called Badarsana, which is a part of Vrindavan. And in that area, there are hundreds of villages that are they're really in poverty. Many of these villagers have never seen a doctor or a dentist in their lives. They wear rags. They're in tiny little one-room huts. And we have about 200 volunteers that come to Mumbai for organizing this camp. And we have volunteers. Some of them are members of our congregation, and some are doctors who just want to do something good. So this one doctor, who's a very high-level ophthalmologist, who lives in a beautiful flat or apartment in Mumbai, has all the comforts in the world, he's very wealthy, he's very well known. Somehow or other, he decided to come, just to see what it was. And in that area, it's really cold because it's in the winter, this camp. And it lives in a very, very simple place. And there's a lot of mud. Most austere situation he'd ever been in. He did so many surgeries, but one in particular was an old Brijavasi lady. She was about 80 years old. She looked like she was about 95 years old. She was wearing torn, dirty rags, although she washed it every day. But the place she washed it was all muddy places. She had cataracts in both eyes and she couldn't see properly for years. A couple days after the surgery, he took off the bandage from her eye, and she could see for the first time. She was so happy. She expressed her gratitude in a very, very simple way. She was totally uneducated, unsophisticated. She took her old hand and started as hard as she could beating the doctor on the top of his head. She was slapping him. And as she was slapping him, she was smiling with her toothless mouth, and she kept saying, "May Radharani bless you! May Radharani bless you!" The doctor was crying. It was the most meaningful experience in his life, he said, that he made such a difference in another person's life. It was more valuable to him than all the money he's making in his career. Every year since then, he comes to that eye camp with his entire family because he wants to teach them the joy of seva, of serving without selfish motives. I'll give another example. A few years ago, I was in Beverly Hills at the Milk and Global Conference, where very, very top people from business, banking, entertainment, science, medicine, sports, they come together. Somehow or other they invited me to speak. But I was invited to one particular gathering in a ballroom. There was about 3,000 people there. There was a panel. And they had CEOs of the largest supermarket chain in America. They had CEOs of one of the top casino and hotel chains in America. They had top doctors, cancer research, award-winning scientists. But I'm going to tell you about one person. Because Swamis, we have our way of choosing what inspires us. There was a Hall of Fame baseball player. Do you all know what baseball is? It's kind of a strange way of playing cricket. His name is Joe Torre. Have any of you heard of him? Have you heard of the New York Yankees? The New York Yankees is the most successful baseball franchise in the history of America. And the New York Yankees, they did not make a playoff for about 12 years. And this was the worst they'd ever been. So they decided to hire this Joe as their manager. And all the press considered it the worst mistake. They were blasting against Joe. They were blasting against the Yankees. He's useless. He will ruin the team worse than it already is. He was a Hall of Fame player himself. And he was a manager and didn't do so good. But in the next 10 years, the New York Yankees were in 6 World Series, and they won 4. And he was, to this day, one of the top 5 baseball managers in the history of baseball. So he was introduced by telling all these things that I'm saying, and much more. And on the panel, he was asked, what was the most meaningful thing that you've done in your life? He said, all the money I made from being a great baseball manager and player, and all the fame I got, doesn't compare to what I'm about to tell you. He said, do you know how I became such a good baseball player? He said, I was born in a poor area of New York City. And he talked about the violence and the abuse in his house. He suffered so bad as a child. He felt unloved. There was so much anger, so much violence. I think his father was an alcoholic or something. It was terrible. He said he suffered so bad when he was a little boy. The only relief he had is to go into the little empty lots and play baseball. And he just took out all of his anguish, all of his anger, all of his miseries in hitting and catching and throwing. And he became a champion. He said, I started an institution. Later on, he goes to the inner city schools and gives counseling and guidance and therapy to children from abusive homes. He said, when I see these children who were suffering like I was, and they feel loved, and they feel a meaning in their life, and they smile with gratitude, that is limitlessly more fulfilling than all my medals and all my trophies and all my championships. And then he said something very interesting. He said, and actually, this institution for helping the children was not my idea. It was my wife's idea. I'm just assisting her. I looked around at all these bankers and all these big CEOs and millionaires and billionaires and everybody else in the audience. They were all crying. No one was crying when people was talking about their different management schemes. What really is meaningful and fulfilling in our lives? Do we even have time to ask that question when we're constantly being bombarded by weapons of mass destruction? Human evolution is not about the titles we get or the technology we invent. Human evolution is when we grow from the obsessive need to get things to the brilliant joy of giving, of sharing. That is compassion. I remember in my own life, as a child, my mother taught me this principle. In so many ways, the nature of boys and men is we have a tendency to forget little things. But the little things that we have a tendency to forget are considered really big for ladies and girls. An example, for my mother, remembering her wedding anniversary meant so much to her. But for my father, it didn't mean anything. So I would have to call him and remind him, it's Mother's wedding anniversary, you better bring her something. Oh, yes, I forgot all about it, thank you. And then he'd come home and he forgot about it. And for her, you don't care. I'm raising your children, I'm taking care of your house, you don't care. He said, I do care. And I would sometimes ask my father, then why don't you tell her you care? He said, she should already know these things. But that's not how it works. So it was her birthday. And I forgot about it. And it was already kind of getting to dinner time. And somehow or other, somebody called her to wish her a happy birthday on the phone, and I overheard it. So I thought, oh, I forgot. I have to get her something. I was just a little boy. So I ran to the backyard. And my mother had a rose garden. Just 6 rose bushes were growing. And there was one rose that grew. And I tore it off. I stole it from her. I stole a rose. And I ran inside and I gave it to my mother. I was about 9 years old. And I said, happy birthday, Mother. She knew where I got it. She took that rose, put it to her forehead and put it to her heart, and she smelled it, and she cried. She cried with such affection, and she said, thank you, thank you. And then she said something that was like a seed that later grew into a rose that is what I live for. She said, it's not the thing that counts, it's the thought that counts. She said, if you were to give me a pearl necklace or a diamond ring, or steal one of my own roses, if there's love, if there's sincere affection, that is what makes anything valuable. That is what makes something valuable to the human heart. The price tag, whatever it is, whether it's something very expensive or something that's free for everyone, if it's offered with love and devotion, it has limitless value. And if it doesn't, it has no value whatsoever to the heart. I didn't understand what she said then. But years later on my spiritual journey, I understood. She was teaching me what I'm learning is the very essence of religion, the very essence of Bhagavad Gita. Savaipum samparo dharamo yathopaktir mokshache lahoitaki apradihata yagatma suprasidati. The Srimad Bhagavatam tells the supreme dharma. Dharma means occupation. It means religion. The supreme dharma is loving devotional service to the Supreme Lord. Such love and devotion must be unmotivated by selfishness or arrogance and uninterrupted by ever-changing circumstances to actually satisfy the self. To love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself, it's the same principle. Within our tradition, I follow Bhakti Yoga or Vaishnavism. There are 3 principles that are really important for cultivating that connection. Satsang. Gatherings like today, where we come together with people who enlighten us, inspire us with faith, with direction, with blessings. Sadhana, putting some time a day, quality time, for spiritual practice, to actually reconnect. Yoga means to reconnect the body, the mind with the soul, and to reconnect the soul with God, with the environment around us, and all living beings. In our tradition, we meditate on God's names, these beautiful mantras, to tune us into the frequency of our true nature and grace. And sadachar. Sadachar means to live with character. I believe it was Rajiv, he's quoted Woodrow Wilson, who was the President of the United States when my grandfather was living. He made another quote. If you lose your wealth, you lose nothing. If you lose your health, you lose something. If you lose your character, you lose everything. We love our children. But what is love? I've seen children from extraordinarily wealthy parents who are really miserable. A little girl. She has the best dresses, the best food, the best games and toys. She looks pretty. but she lives in misery because all she really wants is to feel her parents' love. Not in things, but in relationships. The legacy of our lives is the example we give to our children. I'm going to end soon, but I'd like to share a little story that I heard when I was a little boy, and it moved me. And it still moves me. How many of you have heard of Easy Eddie? Please raise your hands. Well, in Chicago, people know about Easy Eddie. He was a very high-level attorney, a lawyer. He was expert at manipulating the law. And because he was so good, the head of the mafia, Al Capone, hired him. How many have heard of Al Capone? Anyways, I'm not going to go into too many details, but he was a really mean, cruel person. He had this machine called the mafia, and they were murdering people, innocent shopkeepers. His people would go and say, we are selling insurance. You pay us this month every month, and we will ensure that a bomb does not go off in your shop. And if you don't pay us, we will ensure that a bomb will go off in your shop. So these poor people had to pay them. At a time, prohibition, when alcohol beverages were illegal in America, he was producing it and selling it. Drugs, alcohol, prostitution. Everyone knew what he was doing. But no matter how hard the police tried, they couldn't convict him of anything, year after year. For a couple reasons. One is that everybody knew if they testify against him, they'll die. So out of fear, no one would testify. Another reason is because he was paying the police and paying the judges so much, nobody would convict him. But one of the main reasons is Easy Eddie. He knew the legal ways for him to manipulate things so he would never be put in prison. Easy Eddie was given so much money. He had a mansion in the heart of Chicago, practically a whole block of an estate. He had private airplanes. He had the best of cars. He had the best of everything material. And this is in the 1920s. And he had a son. And he saw his son was kind of not doing so well. And he was thinking, I've given my son everything money can buy. But there's one thing I've not given my son. A father that he could be proud of. Because as he grows up, he's going to know that everything I've given him was stained with death and exploitation. The only way I could give my son pride in his father is I must testify against Al Capone. And if I do, I will probably die. And he did. He made the sacrifice. Ultimately, along with the FBI, he helped to convict Al Capone of not paying his income tax. That's all they could get him on. But he went to a federal penitentiary. And shortly after that, Easy Eddie was driving in his car on a side street of Chicago. They filled his entire car with bullets, and he fell to the street in a pool of blood. He died. He made an ultimate sacrifice because he actually loved his son. Now I'm going to tell you another story. There was a boy named Butch. Butch was in the Air Force during World War II. A squadron of his planes were going off. They were fighting against the Japanese in those days. He was in the USS Lexington, a huge battleship with about 3,000 people on it. As he was going, something was wrong with his airplane. Perhaps not enough fuel. So he had to turn back all alone. And as he was coming back, he was horrified by what he saw. He saw a whole squadron of about, if I remember, around 10 Japanese bombers heading toward the battleship, USS Lexington. They were not expecting. They were about to be bombed. The ship would have been sunk in the ocean, and everyone would have died. He could have just flown away. But he attacked one person against 10. And he was shooting at them with such enthusiasm. He shot down several of them. And then he ran out of ammunition. And he started diving his plane to cut off their wings. And he did that. And a couple other planes fell in the ocean. And the rest of his enemies, they thought this man is completely a madman. And they just flew away in fear. And his plane, crippled, beaten down, somehow or other, it landed in his mothership, the Lexington. And people saw what he did with their own eyes. He was the first pilot in World War II on the American military to win the Congressional Medal of Honor, the highest honor there is. His name was Butch O'Hare. And in honor of his sacrifice for the well-being of others, they named O'Hare Airport after him. The interesting thing about this story is Butch O'Hara was the son of Easy Eddie. This is the impact that his father made on him. Selfless service. What is love? If we give money to our children, if we give luxury to our children, if we give high positions to our children, if we don't give them the value of love, if we don't give them the value of compassion and selfless service, if we don't give them an inner connection to their own souls, nothing's going to make them happy. They're likely to just become enemies with each other, the children. Real legacy. Satsang, sadhana, sadachar. We can't give something we don't have. We are not proprietors of anything. In course of time, everything will be taken away from us, either due to governmental changes in policies or economic crises or death. But everything's going to be taken away. But we are eternal. Our relationship with God is eternal. Our relationship with each other is eternal. I have seen, Rajiv definitely will not want me to say this, but I'm going to say it. Rajiv Srivatsa. I've known him since he's a young student. And he went into business. And he did really well. And he just decided, because of his spiritual connection, I want to give 50% of whatever I make in charity. He didn't have much when he made that decision, but he kept to his word. And he and the partners that he inspired to do the same felt such limitless joy in doing that. That's what he lives for. And he started an organization to inspire people to do that, because he wants to share the joy that he has. In giving, we really do receive. Arvind Mafala was a dear friend of mine. He was my father's age. And not long ago, when he passed away from the world, even though he has such a historical role in the industry of India, people were crying, talking about his compassion, talking about his goodness. It wasn't about his roles or his deals or his money. Nobody loves you for what you have. People love you for who you are. What we have, people might be impressed, but then if you don't have it, they're not impressed anymore. And most people who are impressed, it's more with envy than it is with love. Do we want to be loved? That's meaningful. We're loved when we give. Arvind Mafala, he did so many charities, and he didn't just give money. He went to those places and was right there with the people because he cared. When my father and mother first came to India and they met him, it completely changed their lives. And for the first time, they really started appreciating what I was doing, because Arvind Mafala liked me. If somebody like that likes you, you must be doing the right thing. And his granddaughter, Anita, is here. When we chant the holy names, these beautiful mantras, it's for the universal purpose of reconnecting us to the great treasure that's within our heart. In the Bible, Jesus says, in this world, your treasure will be eaten by moths, stolen by thieves, and corroded by the rust. But if you make your treasure in the kingdom of God, it's forever. And the next part is most important. He said the kingdom of God is within. It's within all of us. We have inherited the wealth of pure love. We have inherited the eternal nature of the soul. To be instruments of God or Krishna's grace. To share that inheritance with our children and with the whole world. is the true blessing of our lives. Thank you very much.